It's time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and whatever else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I am joined this week by my co-host and chaotic neutral intellectual, Matt Freeman. Matt, how's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty well, Scott. And it seems like this week what we want to talk about is webcomics, which is something I don't believe we've talked about before.
We haven't. It's been a while. We've switched this. I said weekly podcast, and I realized I should have changed that in the script because we've, at least for the time being, switched this show to bi-weekly because we've got some new stuff we're doing, and it's taken up some of our time, so we wanted to give ourselves enough time. So we're doing this one every other week, and it's been the Avengers episode is the last time we got together. Yeah,
it's true. The greatest crossover event in podcast history.
That's true. But as you said, this week we are here to talk about webcomics. Specifically, we are here to talk about the Dungeons and Dragons meta commentary webcomic, The Order of the Stick, created by Rich Burlew. I think he both wrote and drew every episode of that webcomic. We're only going to be talking about the first collection of strips in the webcomic, numbers 1 through 121. I think it was put together into a book called Dungeon Crawling Fools. Matt, I think everyone kind of gets the drill by now, but why don't you tell people why we're talking about this thing this week?
Well, Scott, it's because it's time for another one of our backer reward episodes. Those that have pledged to us at the $20 level get the opportunity to pick a topic, any topic, and have us talk about it. This time around, it was Patron Kevin, who really wanted us to check out and talk about The Order of the Stick. Yeah,
and as you said, this is something that neither you or I have ever really dove into, the webcomics. I don't think either of us had read this one before, correct?
No,
I had not read this.
I had not read this one. I think when we talk about webcomics, we'll talk about some perhaps adjacent things that we've read. But no, I'd heard about this a lot. I'd seen it referenced all over the place. Yeah.
So this is once again one of those opportunities that this patron reward program we do has a chance to bring us into something new that we probably would not have explored or talked about before. So that's always cool. But we'll get into all that when we get to The Order of the Stick. First, Matt, it's time for some news.
This is Daily Planet News. I don't like that.
All right, first up on the docket this week, Matt, Fox announced a bunch of their renewals and cancellations this week, and they canceled the apparently hit comedy Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I didn't know this was a hit comedy, but when they did this, the internet collectively lost its mind.
Yeah, I had literally never heard of this.
Wow.
At all. You could tell me anything about it, really, and I would believe you, because other than the fact that it's like a police show, but a comedy, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a 30-minute police precinct comedy. Andy Samberg is the lead, and it has Terry Crews in it. I've watched like a handful of episodes before. I've never like sat down and watched the show, and it's fun. I enjoyed it. I never was blown away by it. But the internet was, because Thursday Fox announced that they were canceling this. They also announced they're canceling The Last Man on Earth and The Mick, two shows that I also don't really watch.
Yep, haven't heard of those either.
I watched the first season of The Last Man on Earth, and I thought it was excellent, and I don't know why I stopped watching it. It's just the season finished, and then I never picked it up again, so it's probably my fault that it's canceled. That's a good show that I would recommend, and I need to get back to it. But yeah, so they canceled Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Everyone went insane on Twitter, and for once, Matt, on this godforsaken planet, there was some good news that came out of outrage on Twitter. Fox basically stepped out, and NBC said, "Okay, we'll take it." So this show's coming back. It's the sixth season is apparently it's been uncanceled. It's moving over to NBC. Interestingly enough, and this is kind of the thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and the thing that I think is something we could explore. NBC Studios is the producer that made the show. They created the show. They filmed the show. They've made the show, and then they've just sold it to Fox to air the show. So it's basically coming home. And I read an article today, I think it was on IndieWire, talking about the idea of it used to be that television stations bought shows from other like each station has their television distribution line and their television production line, and it for the longest time it has been NBC is going to make a show and it'll sell it to Fox or sell it to ABC. Sometimes they have their own shows, sometimes they don't. But this is, I think, another kind of piece of the puzzle of these people. All these companies are just kind of making their own shows now, and I think it fits into the Amazon model, the Hulu model, the Netflix model, that the network TV is kind of trying to catch up to, where you just make your own stuff. You don't sell your stuff to other stations anymore. You just make it yourself.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You know, it goes, like you said, it goes into this kind of great conversation, this overarching conversation about what is media going to look like? What is it transforming into? Because, I mean, I was sort of, joking. Well, I wasn't actually joking when I said that I hadn't heard of any of these shows, but more than just playing it for laughs, I should say, like, it definitely means something that I haven't heard of these shows. I'm sure 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I could name every show on any of the major networks, even if I didn't watch them, because if you watched any show on the major networks, you're going to have all the other ones advertised to you while you're watching it. Or just because there were fewer shows, the water cooler conversations would always involve those popular shows. Now there's so many shows on so many different platforms, so many of which are not even TV, that, yeah, I mean, there's got to be this wagon circling that you're talking about, and perhaps this is part of the solution, that the networks will become a little bit less lateralized, a little bit more siloized in terms of how they do their content creation and distribution. I don't know. Yeah.
And this also gets to another thing. This show's been on for 5 years. 5 years of television. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so they canceled the show, and everyone lost their minds. Like, this is the best show on the channel. How could you cancel this? It's like 5 years is a good run for television. It's now going to come back for a sixth year, maybe more. Has the expectation of the runtime of shows changed? In this new world of television that isn't television anymore, and I think the answer is probably yes. That this idea that a show will run for 4 years, 5 years, and then pack it up and we did our thing, we're done. It doesn't seem to be what we do anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, because I mean, like you said, it was really strange to be watching on Twitter as everyone exploded into outrage, and I was seeing all these tweets about this show I'd never heard of. And then it seemed to me like it was 24 hours later that people were like, "Good news, it's been saved." And I was like, "Wait a second, did someone just make a business decision on the basis of like a Twitter furor? Because that's not actually a good decision necessarily. Like, just because a bunch of people were mad, and that's the thing, is it may very well be that most people were like, "Oh yeah, all right, no, it's canceled. That's a shame. I like that show." And then, 6 people on Twitter were like, "Yeah, this is a crime." And then because of how Twitter works, that turned into this is a cultural cataclysm that we're losing the show. And I don't know.
You always wonder, like, there's this big uproar, NBC swoops in, saves the show, and then they drop it on their program. It's like, oh, nobody's watching this. Right. so they ended up canceling it a year later. I mean, we don't know if that's the way it's going to work out, but it would be interesting to see it play like that. I always thought, like the biggest example of this, again, with Fox, is when Fox canceled Family Guy, and then Family Guy took off based on DVD sales, and they brought it back years later. And I always thought, wouldn't it be funny if after all this uproar, Family Guy comes back, and then everyone's like, "Oh, cool. We're probably not going to watch it."
Yeah. We really just wanted DVDs, yeah.
Right, but that's not what happened with Family Guy. I think it's still running, right? Yeah. It's when Fox with their animated shows seems to never cancel them because Simpsons still there, still going.
Yeah.
But yeah. Speaking of animated shows and more episodes than there probably should be, we have another TV related news item here, Matt.
What's that?
Cartoon Network has finally, we've been waiting for a while. There was no news of this, but they finally officially renewed Rick and Morty for a 4th season and a 5th season and a 6th season and a 7th. I could keep going. The network ordered 70 episodes of the show, Matt, of Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon's very popular Cartoon Network show, 70 episodes. Which there's only been 31 episodes of Rick and Morty created so far. So that's over 2 times the amount of episodes. It also conveniently lands them at 101 total, which is just over that 100 episode requirement for syndication. So that's really great news for Roiland and Harmon, who are going to get paid very handsomely now from this. But I'm wondering, we did a whole podcast about Rick and Morty, and I think we both very much like the show. But is 7 seasons, is 70 episodes more of the show a good thing?
I don't know. I think they probably have that many ideas left. It's what I liked about this news was that they probably are just going to do. They're basically going to say, okay, all right, we'll do your 70 and then we're done. We're not doing any more. That'll be my guess. And that's kind of what I would want to happen, because then they can know when the show is going to end, and they can aim for that, and they can just tell a story where they know where it's going and where it ends. Which I think that they've kind of had in their back pocket what the show was actually about and what its actual conclusion was going to be, all along. So it makes me happy that they get a nice long runway to get there. That does seem like a lot of episodes, though.
Yeah, I mean, if they keep their trend of 10 episodes a season, that's 7 more years of Rick and Morty, and that's assuming they each come out every year, which they've been pretty notoriously bad at. So it's definitely 7 more seasons, but that could be another 14 years at the rate they release seasons of the show.
Yeah,
so.
You're right. I was going to say something like, well, maybe they'll increase the number of episodes, and then I was like, no, that's not likely.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know I listen to Dan Harmon's Harmontown podcast, so he kind of talks about Rick and Morty a lot. And I know he said one of the things that he's very conscious of is the amount of time it took, and basically that fell squarely in his lap because he was always late with scripts. Like he's part of the writing team, and he's writing a lot of the episodes himself, and he was always late. And everyone's on his back. So I think he's made a conscious effort to speed up the turnaround process on the show. So maybe it'll be a year by year thing. I don't know. It's exciting. Like, I'm excited for these guys because they've made this really great thing. And I know Dan Harmon's been looking for the thing that will define his career to where he'll get enough money to where he won't have to constantly stress about making stuff anymore. And his ship has kind of finally come in on this show. And that's great because everything else he's done has always been struggling for relevance, struggling to stay alive. And they just handed him 70 episodes. It's insane. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully they kind of take this and just make 70 really great episodes. Because that's one thing about Harmon and I presume the other people he works with is they seem to be, perfectionists in the sense that I think the reason why things are released so slowly is that they don't release them until they're done, and that really shows because every single episode you're like, wow, this is great. So
yeah, I think that's a great positive outlook to have, and we'll leave it with that. 70 episodes.
All right.
Last but not least on the news this week, Shane Black's Predator is coming out this year. You knew that already, but the teaser dropped this week, so we had a 1.5-minute teaser trailer for this. I wanted to get your opinion, Matt. What did you think when you saw this thing? Are you in on the Predator reboot, Cole? I'm not sure exactly how it works, but
see, here's the thing. I'm in because it's Shane Black, and I'm in because it's Predator. It's not a very good trailer, but who knows if that means anything? We'll see.
Yeah, that's about how I feel. I will be in for anything Shane Black does. Predator is always fun, but this was not a good teaser. There's very little Predator in the Predator teaser. It's a problem the Venom teaser had too, where there was no Venom in the Venom teaser. But so maybe the full trailer for Predator. I just think this teaser does a really bad job of getting across what the tone of this movie is. What it's going for. It's just kind of, it's weird. It's kind of all over the place. They say, who is it that says hybridization like she's never said that word before in her life?
I don't know, but that did strike me as like I was definitely like, that's not part of the Predator thing. I mean, you can do that, I guess. I'm not a Predator purist. One thing that strikes me about the trailer is that, like, normally you try to make me anchor on some particular character to like and see as like the vessel of the audience expectations, and there's sort of maybe one character they do that with, but not really. So I don't know. The
assassin guy? I honestly don't know either. It was Olivia Munn who said hybridization. Just like Jenny Slate in the Venom trailer said symbiote, like she's never said that word before.
Yeah.
I think these trailers are very. I've compared them to each other twice, and it's because they felt similar to me when I watched them, which is devastating because I think Venom is going to be terrible, and I think Predator actually has a good chance of being good just by the people involved with it. But you're right that there's no, like, Jacob Tremblay opens a box and it has a bunch of Predator stuff in it, and why?
Yeah.
There's a lot of confusing stuff here, but man, I think the cast is I like Olivia Munn as much as I don't think that was a particularly good line read, but it has Sterling K. Brown in it. It has Keegan-Michael Key in it. It has Alfie Allen in it. And of course our boy Shane Black, who we did a whole episode discussing why he's so amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's going to be great. We really got to wait for the full trailer to really get a feeling of what this movie is about. But as a teaser, I thought it did a bad job.
Yeah, I guess we've been seeing a lot of that recently, like with the the new Jurassic World trailer, where I'm just like, I've never seen a worse trailer in my life. How are we getting worse at this as a civilization? Like I thought we had the art of trailers pretty well down at this point.
I'm really sick of the present day trailer style. I think I realized this when the new Robin Hood movie came out. Trailer came out. I don't know if you saw that one. It's just like the loud, like it's taken the Inception like boom thing to like, it's almost gotten to be a parody of itself, and it's just like I feel like trailers are very formulaic now, and I'm sure they were always formulaic. It's just maybe the style worked better on me back in the day. But I hope we stumble into a new style of trailer cutting here pretty soon, because even movies I end up loving, I'm just not impressed by their trailers.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we had it figured out and then we forgot again. By we, I mean Hollywood, I guess.
Yeah. All the companies they hired to do this.
Yeah.
That ended up cutting Suicide Squad.
Right.
For some reason.
Yeah. I mean, no one else would take it, I guess.
Yeah. All right. That's all we had for news this week. Let's move on to the main event. Let's talk about the Order of the Stick. And I think that the best way to frame this discussion before we talk about these 121 panels themselves is to talk about our history with webcomics in general, and then maybe to talk about webcomics as a form of storytelling a bit, and then get into this story proper. So let's talk about webcomics, Matt. Tell me about your experience with webcomics. Is this something you have spent a lot of time on in the past? Something you enjoy?
Absolutely. It's funny to me that we haven't talked about webcomics until now, or maybe if we have, it hasn't been very much. But I've been reading webcomics since like the 90s, basically. I mean, I think I read Penny Arcade pretty much almost the whole time it's been a thing, which is 20 years now. Jesus Christ. Like Achewood is one of my favorite things ever in any medium. and that was a fairly long running webcomic. There's like a handful of other ones that I really enjoy. I think the one that's going to come up a lot in this conversation is probably 8-Bit Theater, which it's going to come up because it was basically this kind of trope aware comedy, like based on, I guess it was based on the 8-bit like Final Fantasy games, but it also kind of dragged in all kinds of stuff from all kinds of other games, video games, and had that sort of like we're making fun of the self-awareness and the tropiness of the fact that we're in a video game, which is similar to Order of the Stick, because Order of the Stick is doing a similar thing except for Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of the humor comes from, hey, we're in a game, in both cases. I could write. I've for some time actually been meaning to write a long article about Achewood, actually, because I love it so much. But rather than talk more about webcomics, I'll throw that question back at you. What's your history with webcomics?
Nowhere near as extensive as yours, I don't think. The only real webcomic I've ever spent serious time with was Penny Arcade back in the day, and God, I haven't looked at Penny Arcade in a long time. They're still doing comics, right?
Yeah, I'm not even going to say that I keep up with it because it's funny. I just keep up with it because it's a habit that I've had for 20 years, apparently. I'm only now realizing this. Yeah.
So, I mean, like Penny Arcade has kind of transitioned. I think they still do twice a week comics, whatever, but Penny Arcade is the expo now. So
right.
That's, I think the actual comic, the thing that started them all, is such a small part of their business practice now, that they've expanded beyond that. But I definitely did read some 8-Bit Theater back in the day. I think there was a time when I was keeping track of it pretty regularly, but I think I fell off somewhere in the hundreds on that strip. And I never really got into anything outside of that. I've never read Achewood. I never got into PvP. I knew people that were really into PvP. I never liked Control Alt Delete, which is the one everyone makes fun of now.
Yeah. Did you ever read the Perry Bible Fellowship ones?
No.
Oh, that's a treasure. That's they're all like one-offs. There's no like continuing story. It's sort of like Far Side. And then there's Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. That's another one that I can't really claim that I keep up with it, actually, because he comes out with so damn many of them, but that's usually delightful.
Yeah, I will say that H Bomber Guy, I don't know if you listen to his YouTube channel.
No.
He just did his most recent video was a very interesting look into Control Alt Delete, and basically look into the comic that everyone knows, Loss. And I thought it was fascinating. The name of the video is Sonic 2 about capitalism, but it was a trick because he's ridiculous. It's the weirdest fucking video. He like goes crazy with it. Like it gets existential and insane in the best way. But it also really explores like the hatred of Control Alt Delete that stemmed from that comic.
Yeah.
And the general view of that comic as compared to like the Penny Arcade. And I think he makes some pretty sharp criticism to show how Penny Arcade actually, the style of jokes and stuff that they do was very similar to Control Alt Delete back in the day. But it's a great video that I recommend everyone take a look at.
Yeah, I would love to, because I mean, I always thought it was one of the great examples of like internet meme flashpoint, like mob mentality, that everyone decided that not only was this not funny, but it was like the worst thing in the world. When really it was probably just like, oh, that's in poor taste. But it turned into like one of the most long lasting memes that, it's insane. I want to watch that. That sounds great.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes too. For those of you that haven't seen it, it's so weird, Matt. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say about it. But yeah, so I guess let's talk about the art form then. Let's talk about like webcomics are very prevalent on the internet, and they were very prevalent in the early internet, like before video content was possible. People drew stuff and shared it with each other, and it's this like kind of like probably one of the earliest examples of the proliferation of self-published creation on the internet.
Oh yeah. No, I in high school I had like done caricatures of myself and all my friends, and was totally gonna do a webcomic. It was way more energy than I actually like. Once I realized how much time it would actually take to do, I gave up on that. But yeah, like I remember it being like nowadays you make a YouTube video or a podcast.
Yeah.
But back when we were little tots running around in high school or whatever, it was like, oh yeah, webcomics. That's the thing. That's how you put your ideas and your art out in the world.
Little tots running around in high school.
Yeah.
I think you have a very interesting memory of what high school was like. Just running around in our diapers in high school.
Playing with our craft sets.
Yeah, and it's a very, like, I mean, of course, comics, like, I think it's interesting that comics have kind of seen a comeback based a lot around the success of superhero films, but I think for a while there, comic sales really kind of slacked off. And at least in my perception, and this could be factually incorrect, but at least in my perception, webcomics kind of picked up on that. There's this thing where it was a regularly updated comic that you could just type in a web address and go to. And they filled a hole that when people stopped going to the comic book store and regularly buying comics, they filled that. And I think it's so funny. Like, you and I do a show about a web published book, and this is just another symptom of the change of how we consume content.
Yeah.
And it's gone in phases here.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because as we were just talking about webcomics that I read in the past, all the ones I listed were like kind of light comedic ones, and now you just reminded me, like, no, there have been a number of serious dramatic webcomics that I've consumed also, but those tend to have shorter runs and they tend to end rather than just endlessly, continuing, like Penny Arcade, where it's like it's not really a story, it's just silliness. But yeah. There are a lot of dramatic, really good, actually dramatic webcomics that are, maybe the art style is a little bit unpolished, but they're sort of narratively, I think, as good as anything that comes out of a major comic book press.
Yeah, and I mean, Penny Arcade, even, like, they have their story comics now too, right? They have their
arcs.
Yeah, like they have their arcs, but they also have branched off into, like, I don't know what they're called because I haven't read Penny Arcade in forever, but they have, I think it's the Airwood or something, where they do like a completely different style, like serial storytelling comic.
Yeah, I think they do. I don't even really pay attention to that, but you're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. And I think that kind of brings us to this thing. Yeah. Brings us to the Order of the Stick. This comic started, I think it's funny because you go and you look it up on Wikipedia and it says, yeah, it started as just supposed to be like one-off jokes, but then the author quickly changed their mind and it turned into a continuing story. And you can almost pinpoint exactly when that is, because the first issue of this comic is just like people fighting random, like, characters we don't even know fighting random things, and we don't know why they're there or what they're doing. And then, like, 13 or 14 episodes in, suddenly it's like, oh, we're in this dungeon to accomplish this objective, and it shifts from a Penny Arcade type of just one-off joke strips into an actual story pretty quickly on.
Yeah, well, I think that was part of the fun for me, was actually like watching this thing be made and like retconned into place, because there were a lot of things like that where there would be either a character or a story element where it would like first be introduced in a way that seemed very either random or just like convenient, like, okay, we need an orc here, and then later that would turn out to be that character would like recur in a way that was a little bit amusing and satisfying, and you realize that you're watching someone who's kind of like finding this narrative, like chiseling away at a block of pure narrative substance to find the underlying narrative, and so we only read the first 112 or so, right?
Yeah, it's basically the first arc of the story.
Yeah, and that's not very much to chew on, frankly. It's not a whole lot of material that we read, but it is enough to see like, oh, this is fun. And every strip has a pretty good like riff on some game mechanic where you can kind of imagine this person having experienced this thing in their real life playing Dungeons and Dragons or something like it.
Right.
And then it coming into play in the episode in a fun way.
Mm-hmm. So what was your overall impression of this, especially as compared to the other serialized story comics that you've experienced?
I guess it reminds me of a lot of the other web comics that I'm familiar with, where it starts out as just like a pure lark on the part of the creator, where they're just like, all right, let me whatever, I feel like starting a webcomic, and it takes time, but it forms up into something a bit better, and you can actually, it becomes funnier. The art becomes, I'm not going to say the art becomes better because it's intentionally
stick
figure art, but it becomes a little bit better composed, I guess, and you can kind of tell what's going on a little bit better. The characters become a little bit more defined and start getting backstories and stuff. So like that's I guess it fits very well into what I think of as like the normal growth arc of a webcomic, where they very often, even Aquawood, which I think is like a artistic masterpiece, started out in this way where it's just like he was writing about his stuffed animals and pretending that they were people, and they didn't really have characters. They were just stuffed animals talking, and that was the joke. And now then they become heartbreaking characters later on. So it actually kind of makes me want to maybe like skip ahead 500 episodes and read, and see how much further the creator has pushed this idea of or just grown as an artist, I should say.
Because I mean, this started way back. This was 2003, so I think Penny Arcade didn't start till
it started in 98 actually.
Penny Arcade started in 98?
Yeah, I was just checking on this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So but it was still very early on in this whole internet webcomic thing. I think that's still pretty early.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you can tell, like, I think Burlew said he was writing articles and just like drew this comic as like, come to my website to see this comic and then also read these things I wrote.
Yeah.
And it quickly became the comic was the most popular thing, so he transitioned to just doing that the whole time. You can kind of see that as you go along in these early ones. You can see, you're absolutely right that this starts, I think a lark is the best way to describe it. It's just like funny meta observations about Dungeons and Dragons, and not exactly like original funny meta observations about Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's the kind of stuff that I think everyone playing Dungeons and Dragons jokes about. But I did definitely start to enjoy it more when it transitions into that, where they're actually exploring, maybe not characters, because I don't think these characters are very deep, but it's like telling a story. It's doing something with it.
Yeah.
And it's really probably about 50 issues in where I really started to feel that.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I was happy with where we, with where our backer chose to end the reading, because if it had ended before that point, I would have had to be like, well, I can't stop there. I have to get resolution on what's going to happen with, and that, that tells you that the storytelling is working on you, actually. So
yeah. I think this is all these have been published into books, and I think this was the first book. It's called Dungeon Crawlin' Fools.
Yeah,
I guess that's technically true, but it's I guess Zycon is like the main bad guy of this whole thing.
Seems like it at this point. Yeah.
And so it's the first encounter with him, and we go through that, and then I mean, it definitely has a functional end while still obviously leaving room to continue. And looking at this, like, my issue when you really dive into the storytelling of this, as much as I did appreciate it more when it started telling a story, there's just not a lot there. There's not really a lot for us to dissect storytelling wise in this thing. Yeah,
I think that's true. I mean, you can't. It just kind of is what it is. It's he decided halfway through that he was actually telling a story, and then he decided to start working on the characters. That's why I say I want to see, like, if it where it actually goes, and whether it Yeah, and there were actually a couple of articles. What's the word? Episodes. Whatever episodes. Strips. Yeah.
What's comic lingo? I don't know.
Yeah. A couple of strips that were not funny actually. That were serious. And so I wonder if he goes more in that direction later, or spends more time exploring character backstories, or it just makes me curious, like what are his artistic instincts going to lead to.
Yeah, I mean, there was this whole like sub story with the dwarf cleric,
right,
and his relationship with that female dwarf cleric,
right, that
is like goes into like gender roles and exploration of what is and isn't right, and that would like that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I was like, oh, we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I don't the comic just kind of leaves it. It feels like something that it's not dropping forever. It feels like it's just something dropping temporarily, because I think our character Durkon, I think his name is the one that's probably in the wrong here. And I think the author very clearly like draws that line. It's that like we're not supposed to be thinking, yeah, you told her, but yeah. So I wonder. It's one of those things where picking up that storyline would be interesting to me. But it really came in this goofy like meta commentary on D&D, and suddenly we're talking about relationship expectations and marriage and all these things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm definitely curious to poke around and see where the story goes from there. Because
yeah, and if every character gets a detailed exploration like that, where they go into something a little more serious and a little more unexpected, I mean that could be, in my mind, why Kevin said you guys need to check this thing out, because that I think would be really interesting. As it is in what most of we see, it's very much just playing in like, this is the dumb bard and this is the rogue that loves stealing things. And I think those jokes they can be funny, but they're also like, if you've played D&D, you've probably made that joke.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to insult it, but it's just like a lot of times it goes for the very obvious, very easy joke sometimes. And maybe it's just because it's 2018 now and this stuff was drawn in 2003 that I've seen that same joke done 20 different times.
Mm-hmm. Right. That I almost don't feel that it's like fair to criticize just the first 100 odd strips, because it's so clearly in its infancy. Like I would kind of feel the same way about Akewood, where like if I was going to ask somebody to read Akewood, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, just read the first 50, because that would give you a completely wrong impression of what it turns into eventually. But it's very interesting just to take it for what it is, as this kind of example of the webcomic medium, and how it's kind of cool that you can tell a story and have it actually function using very few words and some panels and some stick figure art. It's very, very minimalist. I think it's almost this I think it does remind me of 8-bit theater, not just in the subject matter, but also in the fact that 8-bit theater was was sprites. It was all entirely sprite art, not entirely sprite art, but it leaned heavily on the sprite art, which is a self-conscious decision to reduce the amount of work you have to put in to make a good image appear on the page. And it's the same thing here, where it's like, all right, gonna go with stick figures, presumably because that's much faster to do, and you don't have to make as many design decisions. And I think it's cool. I think it's cool when people kind of discover some twist on an art form that allows them to be more productive with less energy.
Sure. Yeah, and so now I've been sitting here thinking about what I just said, that like I've heard this joke 20 times. And so I'm thinking about 2003 me. I'm going back in time, and this idea, like, I mean, the internet had been around for a bit at this point, right? But it was still like, I don't think it was as much of a part of our daily lives as it is these days. And so this idea that like prior to social media, prior to being plugged in with communities all the time, D&D, if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons, it was probably a very like insular experience. You had you and your 3 to 4, 5 friends, whatever, and you're all experiencing this thing together. And then this webcomic comes along, and it's telling the same jokes that you tell to each other. And it's like, it's almost like watching people play D&D. And that, of course, has become a thing as well, right? I mean, like,
right.
We just started our Weaver Dice campaign this past week, which is an offshoot of D&D, but podcast and video watching people play Dungeons & Dragons is an enormously popular thing. And this feels like a very early web iteration of that. Thank you. And like, it's like, look, you group of 4 people that play this with each other alone. There's thousands of people, millions of people out there in the world that are having those same experiences as you. And look, you can gather around this comic that is telling the same jokes that you tell each other, and is having the same arguments that you have with each other, and is making fun of like level, meaning both level as a character and the level of the dungeon. And I think there's something like inherently communal about that kind of experience, and it's like, yes, I am part of a Dungeons and Dragons community that maybe back in 2003 there just wasn't as much that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That there was not, and I probably think could not have been the Adventure Zone in 2003.
Right. Right.
But this is sort of serving that same need, speaking to. And really something the internet has just done more and more of over time, which is to speak to small subcultures of people who there are a lot of them in total, but there are few enough of them that, in your city, there might be 20 other people like you.
Right.
Or maybe there are 1,000 other people like you, but that's actually a really small number for a city still.
Yeah. Well, and your way to connect and find those people is difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So the internet has been doing this all along, and like you said, this is how that started. This is webcomics back in the low bandwidth days were the way to do that.
And the Adventure Zone comparison is great, I think, because like the Adventure Zone, this kind of starts a little aimless, right? Mm-hmm. Like we already talked about that. The Adventure Zone, the first few episodes of that, they just took like a Dungeons and Dragons pre-written thing, and we're just doing that,
right,
and trying to figure out the game and figure out what this show was. And I think this comic is very much doing the same thing. And that eventually they fell into a story and realized they want to focus on the story and dive into the characters more. And that's exactly what that podcast did. So yeah, it's like, these are things that didn't even occur to me until we sat down and started talking about them. But like, the line is there. The line from 8-Bit Theater and Order of the Stick to today's streamed Dungeons and Dragons sessions and podcast of live play, or what's the official term for it? Is like actual play or something?
I think actual play. Yeah, I'm not sure though.
But the through line from one to the other, I think, is totally there. Yeah,
that's kind of cool. I'm immediately going sci-fi and extrapolating this into like, okay, well, what do we do when we have like VR and telepresence and everything?
Yeah.
That's fun to think about.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think the guy in the shadows looks like?
I'm super to
see what he looks like.
Super curious about that. I'm gonna have to.
I almost wanted to cheat. I'm kind of like, I felt like they were just gonna do a really dumb joke, right? That it was just gonna be something that's not actually that intimidating at all, and they might still go there. But the fact that like they held the reveal makes me think he might do something more interesting with it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm curious though. I think I'm gonna have to find that out one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So, who is your favorite character?
Let me think for a second. Probably Belcar Bitterleaf, the evil halfling ranger.
You love your hobbits.
Yeah, who just murders everyone, because he reminds me of Black Mage in 8-Bit Theater, which which is also my favorite character.
I like the Bard. I think he's hilarious. Notice these are characters we both kind of played last time we played D&D together. The stupid Bard that
Yeah.
The bard jokes are the ones that worked the most on me because I think bards are inherently ridiculous as a concept. So seeing it like explored on the meta level where it's like accepting that they can do a lot of stuff, but they're like basically a ridiculous idea is fun to me.
Yeah. I think one of the funniest bits to me was when he meets his brother, and his brother's like, "Oh, I forget the exact wording of the joke, but he's like, "Oh, I'm a multi-class fighter, mage, enchanter who focuses on enchanting spells," and it's clear that he's just like approximated what a bard is through multi-classing. And I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess the joke worked better on the actual strip, but yeah.
But I mean, the whole like mirror party thing was, I mean, that's not exactly an original idea, but I thought it was executed well.
Yeah.
In this storyline, I was kind of like, oh, we're doing that right away. Like that's one of the first things it really does when it gets into the story is we're doing this mirrored party of our guys. And I was surprised it did it that it went into that well that quickly, but yeah, I mean it worked. So.
Yeah. I mean it's definitely he's playing fast and loose with the cliches and the tropes, and he's doing it in a self-aware way where it's very winking, and I would say usually it works in the sense that you are smiling with him rather than like rolling your eyes at it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All right. Do we have anything else to say about this? Are you gonna switch? I know you said you're gonna jump around. Do you think you'll finish the other 900 episodes of the comic and going still?
I don't know. I can't really tell you right now. I might. Here's what's probably going to happen. Just knowing me, okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna read like the next one after the one we finished, and then I'll probably be like, oh, okay, that's mildly interesting, and then I'll read the next one, and I'll be like, oh, now I care about these characters slightly.
4 hours later.
Yeah, right. And then 2 weeks later, I'll be like, well, I finished it,
and it'll be in that episode of what we've been watching. Like, well, I finished the Order of the Stick.
Yep. And I'll be like, it was pretty good, and then I'll never think about it again.
I mean, that is probably the most honest I've ever heard you about the future. Yeah, I think that is literally exactly what's going to happen. I would not be surprised.
Okay, all right, cool.
As long as we get all our episodes out, as long as obsessively reading this comic does not distract from your other duties, Matt.
Yeah, I know. So many duties now.
All right, that's it for the Order of the Stick. I guess for the people that haven't read it, we'll put a link to it in our show notes if you want to check that out. I guess we should have said that at the start, but we'll do that. It's free. It's all there.
Yep.
All right, let's move into our next section of the podcast called What We've Been Consuming. Because it's not just watching. What we've been consuming.
What have you been watching? What have I been watching? Well, I asked you first, so you better tell me.
And it's been a while since we did this, Matt, so we got a few things here. At least I've got a few things.
Cool. Well, yeah, I finally watched Get Out, so that happened.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally. What'd you think?
I liked it. I mean, I knew like every single detail about it through cultural osmosis, but I think I still enjoyed it just as much. And I saw why people loved it, both on an entertainment level and on a this makes me think level.
Now you finally get what people mean when they say the sunken place. You understand now.
Yeah, now I feel even more plugged into the culture.
And that's the most important thing, right?
That's why we watch things, not for any sort of enjoyment or becoming a better person on your own merits. It's just so you can get the memes.
I actually I watched the first episode of season 2 of Westworld, and basically had that same realization that the only reason I watched the rest of the first season was because I felt like I wanted to be involved in the culture. And so halfway through the first episode of season 2 of Westworld, I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna I'm not going to do this.
Gonna tap out right here.
Yep. So I'm done. I'm done with you, Westworld. I don't like that show at all.
That's good. We're growing and evolving as consumers of media.
Yeah.
I
what
also
else you got?
I also spent a number of hours this weekend because I was sick and didn't feel like moving, watching the Patrick Adair Designs YouTube channel, where he makes rings. And this is sort of, I don't remember where I got linked to this originally, but he makes a lot of Damascus rings, like with Damascus and meteorite and superconductor and all sorts.
Was it from our Discord? Because we were talking about.
I think it was from our Discord.
Because it was the Damascus rings that characters in Ward are wearing.
So that must be where it was linked from. Because I was like, Damascus rings. That's the Ward thing. So yeah, I guess it was the Discord. But yeah, it's really hypnotic to watch him make all these cool rings. So if you're sick and slightly out of it, then maybe watch a whole bunch of movies of rings being made.
The fun part about this is, Matt and I both have the Daily Planet YouTube channel installed on our thing, and we switch back and forth them a lot. So sometimes, without realizing it, one or both of us will be on the Daily Planet channel instead of on our own YouTube accounts, and we'll just start seeing recommendations pop up, and I'll be like, Matt's watching workout videos again.
Yeah.
And if you've been paying attention to it, you will see me watching these Australian guys that just drop heavy things off of a tall tower onto other things. And I've been watching so many episodes of that show. So I apologize for that.
Oh, excellent. No, it's great to have some cross-pollination there. I'm sure the algorithm is very confused about this.
It is. It's almost like there's two separate people here that their circles don't cross over in a lot of things.
Yeah. One of them is for some reason watching anime videos, and the other one is angrily striking their keyboard whenever they see those videos.
Is aggressively downvoting every single one of those videos.
Interesting.
I'm not actually doing that.
I know.
All right. So I kind of took over your part of this whole
section. No, that's okay. I was done. We're done.
Okay. So I've been watching a lot. So I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can because I don't want to spend too much on this. I saw a couple weeks ago the movie Tully, which is the new movie by Diablo Cody and directed by Jason Reitman. They also have collaborated in the past on Juno and A Young Adult, another movie that also stars Charlize Theron. If you haven't heard of this movie at all, which many of you probably haven't because it hasn't been doing very well, the concept is Charlize Theron is pregnant with her third child and eventually has the baby and just is like losing it because there's just so much going on. Their middle child has like behavioral issues that like they can't diagnose. Like something's not quite right with this kid, but they don't know what it is and they can't figure it out. And it's just like her life just kind of goes out of control, and her brother, who is very well off, hires a night nanny for her, which is a thing that I don't know if it's actually a real thing or just a concept for this movie, but it's the idea that like you have someone come into your house at night while you're sleeping and deal with the baby so you can get a good night's sleep.
I think that's probably a thing, but it's definitely going to be really expensive.
Yeah. So he offers to do that for her, and at first she says no, like she's too proud to do that. Eventually she just needs it and calls the night nanny, who is the character Tully, who comes in and they have a whole relationship between the two of them, and it's kind of about motherhood and a very, very frank and real look at what having children is like. I think people with children, like Matt, I think if you watch this movie, you'd be like, yeah. And people like me who do not have children watch this movie and go, no, I don't want to do that. No. I think it was a very, very well done movie. I enjoyed it a lot. I think Charlize Theron is excellent. She gained 50 pounds for this role in order to play a woman who has just had a baby and play them as realistically as possible. And I think Diablo Cody is a writer I enjoy a lot. I thought Juno was a really good movie. I thought Young Adult was a better movie, and I think this is out of their collaborations, this is the best. It's interesting because it's kind of like they're growing up, right? Like Juno is a movie about a teen pregnancy, and then Young Adult is a movie about a woman who is emotionally and maturity wise still a kid, but is an adult going back to her the place where she grew up. And then this is an adult, a woman who's dealing with adult issues and dealing with motherhood and all these things. And I think it's a very well written movie. I enjoyed it a lot. So if you haven't checked out Tully, give it a shot.
Cool.
Especially, it's Mother's Day. Go see Tully.
Oh yeah, sounds good.
I also, just this past weekend, saw You Were Never Really Here. This is the Joaquin Phoenix movie. He plays... It's tough to talk about this movie without giving away stuff, but he plays a guy that basically finds people. People hire him to... my daughter ran away, or if someone was kidnapped. It's kind of like... I heard it described as an indie version of the movie Taken. and I think that's a pretty apt description. It's written and directed by Lynn Ramsey. It did very well in Cannes last year. I loved this movie. It is intense. It is brutal. It is powerful. And Joaquin Phoenix is... he's one of the best actors working right now, I think.
Yeah.
The way he plays this character, it's just like unbelievable. And like there's so much going on inside this character's head, and he doesn't talk very much, so it all has to be portrayed through his acting, and he nails it, man. Check out this movie. Really, like seriously, it's so good.
Yeah, I definitely want to see it. Glad to hear that it's good. I Joaquin could do anything at this point.
Yeah. I also saw Infinity War again. I actually got to do that. I don't get to see movies again, but I used my movie pass on it this time.
Cool.
And man, it holds up. It's just a fun movie, even the second time around. It's so good. I can't say anything else about it because spoilers are crazy for this movie.
Yeah, I would love to see it again, and that's saying something. So
yeah. Also, I'm still going, Matt. Like I told you, I got a lot of things. I am in the middle of, and by in the middle I mean I'm on book 5 of 70 of either reading or rereading all of Stephen King's books, fiction, nonfiction, his short stories. We have a goal on our Patreon. If you want to look at that, it's Daily Planet, or patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms, where eventually when we get to a certain level, we are going to launch a podcast really diving into the Dark Tower series, Stephen King's magnum opus giant series. And we're going to do some really in-depth analysis on those 7 books. So like in preparation for that, I've been going back and reading or rereading all of Stephen King's books. And I got to The Stand, and I finished The Stand this weekend, a book I had read before. And holy crap, I love this book so much. I forgot, like, it's very long, but I think it captures what I love about Stephen King so much. Like the how well developed the characters are, how much you understand the setting, just his writing. He's so good. He's so good. I love Stephen King. And if you have never read The Stand, it's going to take some time. It's 1,100 pages, but damn, it's a good book.
Do you think you're getting more out of it, having like learned more about story since you read it the first time?
Yeah, I do. And the interesting thing about The Stand is the version I read, and I don't know if this was the version I read originally because it's been so long since I read this book, but the version I read was the unabridged version where he added, I think the book came out in 79, I think 78 or 79, and he released a new version of the book in 1990 and added like 400 pages back into it. And so, and I think most of the pages are just like background on character, and like, the book is about the end of the world. There's like a super flu that escapes from a government facility and wipes out the entire population of the world, except for like less than 1% of people are immune. And those people are basically gathering for the final battle, the final stand between good and evil. And, the first third of the book is like this slow decay into a post-apocalyptic world, and it's something that books like that post-apocalyptic stories don't really do a lot. They don't like, it's usually like, oh, we'll show the virus getting out and then we'll snap to a year after and we'll catch up with everyone. And this is like a slow hundreds of pages of exploration of the end and what it looks like for all our different characters and how that plays out for them personally. And I think it's just so good. And like in this extra version, I don't know if that's necessary for the story. Like I don't know if you need it, but it really makes it feel like this is more than just one little story. It really makes you feel like you're exploring who these characters are, and you're exploring what an event like that would do to a person. And man, he's so good. Like, everyone says Stephen King's bad at endings, and I don't disagree with that. But man, everything up until it is so good that I don't even care by the time I get to the end. Like, the ending of this book is not what you would expect, based on everything it's setting up, but it doesn't matter. It just works.
Yeah.
It just works.
I think you're kind of not reading Stephen King for the endings, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about the journey, man.
Yeah.
He says it himself.
Yeah.
And the last thing, this is my final one, I promise.
Okay.
Promise. A YouTube channel called Goosedrunks. And it's exactly what it sounds like, where a woman reads a Goosebumps story and makes it into a drinking game. And she doesn't like read the whole book on the YouTube video. They're about 40 minutes long, so she kind of summarizes the book and points out what it's stupid and then drinks. I don't know why this is as good as it is, but it is.
Yeah. I can imagine that being pretty funny. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, so the latest episode just came out yesterday, I think, and it's about Night of the Living Dummy. And it's funny because, like, it's funny for me because I remember reading all these books as kids, and I barely remember them. But as she's summarizing the plot elements, I'm like, oh yeah. And one of her drinking rules is every time the kid acts like someone acts really stupid, she takes a drink, which is most of what these characters do. They just act really stupid, and they always apparently have a sibling that's a jerk to them. Like, that's what R.L. Stine writes in his books, is like every time he has an older or younger sibling that's just annoying or a jerk. So every time they do an annoying or jerk things, take a drink. And it's just, she gets really drunk by the end of the videos, and it's good. It's good. That's Goosedrunks.
All right.
I think Jenny Nicholson tweeted about that, and that's how I found it.
Sounds like a very Jenny Nicholson thing.
It does. So that's it. Those are my 5 things.
All right.
And that's all we have for you guys this week. If you have any questions or comments, or just want to talk to us about your experience with the Order of the Stick, did you agree with our assessment? Are you mad at us and think you guys need to read more of this? Let us know. Reach out to us at dailyplanetfilms@gmail.com or on Twitter @dailyplanetfilms. We do try to respond to those messages when we get them, so feel free.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found. Absolutely.
We've got tons of great content over on dailyplanetfilms.com, and more stuff coming each and every week. Last week we launched We've Got Weaver Dice, Matt, which, as we hinted towards in this podcast, is our actual play, we'll call it. Although I think actual plays adhere a little more closely to the rules than we're going to be doing. But it is our we'll just say actual play of Weaver Dice, which is the Worm tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
And Matt is running the game, and we're all playing characters. Me, Michael, Daniel. That first episode was a blast, and the response has been great. So for those of you that are listening to this and have seen that, and thank you for your positive feedback. It's really great when you try something new and something that we're not used to doing, and to get that kind of feedback it's very encouraging.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, everyone.
I got distracted.
It's okay,
because I want to talk about that. Yeah. So if you like the stuff, if you like We've Got Weaver Dice, if you like the Daily Planet podcast, if you like all the shows we do, or any of the shows we do, you can help support us and help make sure we keep creating new content. You can head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms, and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. This episode, this conversation, us reading The Order of the Stick, only exists because of one of our patrons, Kevin, who is nice enough to donate at that $20 level and got to pick The Order of the Stick as a show. So thank you, Kevin, and thank all of you who donate to us. And check out all the other rewards and stuff we have at, once again, it's patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms.
Yeah, check it out. We were always excited to look at some new weird thing we never would have looked at, which is the main purpose, I think, of this program we got going here.
Yeah. This is the fourth one we've done now, and 3 of the 4 have been things that at least one of us have never experienced before.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool thing. I like it a lot. No one has made me watch anime, so we're 4 for 4 on that front. I got it. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of this whole thing without any anime.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, Scott. But please consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
Yeah, head on over to, it's not iTunes. I got to change that, Matt. It's Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts.
Because Apple really wants to make this easy on you.
Yeah, they are trying to distance themselves from iTunes as much as possible because they fully know it's a terrible, horrible program that they wish they could get rid of, but they can't. So they're trying to rebrand everything to get rid of the stigma that comes with the name iTunes, because it's terrible. It's awful.
It is.
It's worse than Skype.
It's all. Yeah, it's
just
really
kidding.
is.
Nothing's worse than Skype.
I'm sorry.
But yeah. So that is all we got for you guys this week. A friendly reminder that this show is bi-weekly now, so we will not be back next week. We'll be back 2 weeks from today, and we will be reviewing Solo, a Star Wars story. And maybe we'll talk about Deadpool 2 as well. I don't know. But we'll be back next week. Will be a new episode of We've Got Weaver Dice. That's what's going to be in the place of this next week. But we'll see you hopefully for one of those. If not, come back and listen to us talk about that new Star Wars movie.
All right.
I can't say see you next week. It's just weird. I don't know what to do.
See you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away.